You've poured your heart and soul into your career for 15 years. You've climbed the ladder, made sacrifices, and finally feel like you've reached a place of security. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, an email arrives that shatters everything. But the heartbreak of losing your job might not be the deepest cut. What if the person you expect to offer comfort instead delivers a brutal blow with just a few harsh words?
Lost your job, huh? Well, what did you expect? You were always too comfortable in that cushy office job.
That's the moment Mark's world truly tilted. Today, we're diving into his story. A story about the unforeseen storm of unemployment, the sting of a father's harsh words, and the surprising aftermath that followed. It's a journey filled with emotional connection, conflict, and a twist you won't see coming. Have you ever felt like your world was suddenly turned upside down? What was your immediate reaction? Mark had always been a planner. Spreadsheets were his love language, and his life was meticulously organized into neat little boxes. He was the kind of guy who knew what he was having for dinner on Tuesday, 3 weeks in advance. His career at Sterling Solutions, a mid-sized tech company, was no different. He'd climbed the ladder steadily for 15 years, starting as a junior analyst and working his way up to a respected project manager. He'd put in the long hours, the weekend work, the missed family dinners, all with the quiet satisfaction of a man building a secure future for his wife, Sarah, and their 2 kids, 8-year-old Lily and 5-year-old Tom. He felt like he was finally hitting his stride, the sweet spot where experience met opportunity. Can you relate to that feeling of finally finding your footing in your career? What did that sense of stability mean to you? The email arrived on a Tuesday, ironically, the day he'd planned on making his famous lasagna. The subject line was bland, important announcement regarding company restructuring. Mark clicked it open, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He'd heard whispers, of course, the usual office rumors about potential layoffs, but he'd always dismissed them. Sterling Solutions was solid, or so he thought. He scanned the email, his eyes skipping over the corporate jargon until they landed on the words that hit him like a punch to the gut. Due to unforeseen economic headwinds and a necessary strategic realignment, your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. His vision blurred, and the hum of the office faded into a distant drone. All those years, all that dedication, and it came down to this? A cold, impersonal email. Have you ever received news that completely blindsided you? What was your initial emotional response? He reread the email, hoping he'd somehow misread it, that it was a cruel joke or a mistake. But the words remained the same, stark and unforgiving. He was out of a job. Just like that. The lasagna ingredients in the fridge suddenly felt heavy, a symbol of a life that felt instantly less certain. He looked around his cubicle, at the framed photos of his family, the motivational posters he'd half-heartedly put up over the years. They seemed to mock him now, reminders of the responsibilities he suddenly felt ill-equipped to handle. What are the first thoughts that race through your mind when faced with unexpected bad news? Do you tend to focus on the practicalities or the emotional impact? He called Sarah, his voice tight, trying to sound calmer than he felt. Her initial reaction was shock, followed by a wave of comforting words. "We'll figure this out, honey," she said, her voice strong and reassuring. But beneath her optimism, Mark could hear a tremor of worry, a shared uncertainty that mirrored his own. They agreed he'd come home early, and they'd talk. As he packed up his desk, the weight of his briefcase felt symbolic of the burden he now carried. The faces of his colleagues blurred as he walked out of the office, a ghost in his own life. The familiar streets on his drive home seemed different, imbued with a sense of foreboding. Have you ever felt like your surroundings change when you're going through a personal crisis? How does your perspective shift? Have you ever experienced a sudden and unexpected career setback? How did it make you feel in those initial moments? What practical steps did you take, and what kind of emotional support did you seek? Mark walked into his house, the aroma of Sarah's comforting chicken soup filling the air. Lily and Tom ran to greet him, their innocent joy a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside him. He hugged them tightly, cherishing their carefree laughter. He knew he had to tell them, at least in a way they could understand, but the words felt heavy and lodged in his throat. Sarah met his gaze, her eyes filled with concern. Later, after the kids were in bed, they sat at the kitchen table, the remnants of their quiet dinner between them. He laid it all out, the email, the shock, the uncertainty. Sarah listened intently, her hand resting on his. Her support was a lifeline, but there was another conversation he knew he had to have, one he was dreading. Who is the first person you usually turn to when you receive difficult news? What kind of reaction do you typically expect or hope for? His father, Robert, was a man of few words and even fewer compliments. A self-made businessman who'd built his own construction company from the ground up, he had a strong belief in hard work and self-reliance. He'd always pushed Mark to be better, to be tougher, often with a bluntness that bordered on harshness. Mark knew his father would want to know, and he also knew what to expect: a lecture, a dose of tough love, and probably a subtle implication that Mark hadn't been working hard enough. But still, a part of him, a small, vulnerable part, hoped for a different reaction this time, a word of comfort, a simple "I'm sorry this happened to you." Have you ever found yourself hoping for a different reaction from someone, even when you know their typical response? What motivates that hope? He called his father the next morning, the phone feeling heavy in his hand. After the initial pleasantries, he broached the subject, his voice carefully neutral. There was a long silence on the other end, a silence that felt heavier than any words. Then, his father's voice, gruff and unwavering, cut through the quiet. "Lost your job, huh? Well, what did you expect? You were always too comfortable in that cushy office job. Never got your hands dirty. This is what happens when you rely on someone else for your paycheck." Mark's heart sank. This was exactly what he'd feared. The lack of empathy, the immediate judgment. It felt like a fresh wound on top of the already raw pain of losing his job. How do you typically react when someone responds to your vulnerability with criticism instead of support? What emotions does that trigger in you? His father continued, his voice laced with disapproval. "You should have started your own business years ago. That's the only way to truly be in control of your own destiny. Now you're paying the price for playing it safe." Each word felt like a barb, digging deeper into Mark's already fragile self-esteem. He tried to explain the situation, the unexpected nature of the layoffs, but his father wasn't listening. He was too busy delivering his verdict, his harsh words echoing the doubts that were already swirling in Mark's own mind. "Don't just sit around feeling sorry for yourself," his father concluded. "Get out there and find something new. And this time, maybe learn a lesson. Nothing is guaranteed." The line went dead. Mark stared at the phone, the silence deafening. The conversation had left him feeling drained and even more disheartened than before. Instead of the support he'd secretly hoped for, he'd received a harsh dose of criticism that only amplified his feelings of failure. Have you ever received unsolicited and critical advice during a difficult time? How did it make you feel, and how did you handle it? Have you ever had a conversation with a parent or close family member that left you feeling more hurt than supported during a difficult time? What were the dynamics at play, and how did you navigate those challenging interactions? The echo of his father's harsh words lingered in Mark's mind like a persistent hum. Too comfortable, playing it safe, paying the price. The phrases replayed in his head, fueling his self-doubt. He knew, intellectually, that his father's views were shaped by his own experiences and his generation's values. But emotionally, the criticism stung. It felt like a dismissal of all the hard work he'd put in, all the sacrifices he'd made for his family. He found himself questioning his choices, wondering if his father was right. Had he been too complacent? Should he have taken more risks? It's easy to second-guess ourselves during times of uncertainty, isn't it? What kind of internal dialogue do you find yourself having when you're facing a setback? Are you your own biggest critic? He tried to shake off the negativity, focusing on Sarah and the kids. Their unwavering support was a balm to his wounded spirit. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, had already started researching job boards and dusting off her network. She reminded him of his strengths, his accomplishments, the value he brought to any team. Lily drew him a picture of a superhero with his face, declaring him the best job finder ever. And even little Tom, in his own innocent way, offered comfort, snuggling up to him on the couch and asking, "Daddy, will you still read me stories?" Their love was a constant reminder of what truly mattered, a beacon in the storm of his anxieties. Who in your life provides you with unwavering support during challenging times? How important is that support system to your resilience? The first few days were a blur of emotions: shock, anger, fear, and a gnawing sense of inadequacy. Mark found himself oscillating between bursts of frantic activity, updating his resume, sending out applications, and moments of paralyzing despair, where the weight of his situation felt overwhelming. Sleep became a luxury, his mind racing with worries about finances, the future, and the crushing weight of his father's disapproval. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, his heart pounding, the silence amplifying his fears. Have you ever experienced the way stress and anxiety can disrupt your sleep? What are some of the ways you try to cope with sleepless nights during difficult times? Sarah encouraged him to stick to a routine, to get dressed every day, even if he wasn't leaving the house. She made sure he ate regular meals and gently nudged him to take breaks, to go for a walk, to do something he enjoyed. She understood that taking care of his mental and physical well-being was crucial, even when it felt like the last thing he wanted to do. Her practical support and unwavering belief in him were a lifeline. It's so important to have someone in your corner during tough times, isn't it? What kind of practical support do you find most helpful when you're struggling? How do you typically cope with the initial emotional fallout of a significant setback? Do you find comfort in routine, support from loved ones, or do you tend to withdraw? What strategies have you found most effective for managing those difficult early days? The initial shock began to wear off, replaced by the stark reality of the job search. Mark quickly discovered that the world had changed significantly since he'd last looked for a job 15 years ago. Online applications, automated screening systems, and the sheer volume of competition made the process feel impersonal and daunting. He spent hours hunched over his laptop, meticulously tailoring his resume and cover letters to each specific job description, feeling like he was throwing applications into a black hole. Have you navigated the job search process in recent years? What were some of the biggest challenges you encountered? The rejections started trickling in, polite but firm emails informing him that they were moving forward with other candidates. Each rejection felt like a small stab wound, chipping away at his confidence. He started to question his skills, his experience, his worth. Had he really become obsolete? Was his father right? Had he become too comfortable, too out of touch with the realities of the job market? It's easy to internalize rejections, isn't it? How do you try to maintain your self-esteem during a prolonged job search? He reached out to his network, former colleagues, and industry contacts, hoping for leads or introductions. Some were helpful, offering words of encouragement and passing along potential opportunities. Others were less responsive, their silence speaking volumes about the transient nature of professional relationships. He realized that in the fast-paced world of business, out of sight often meant out of mind. This can be a tough lesson to learn, can't it? How do you nurture and maintain your professional network over time? He had a few initial interviews, mostly virtual, which felt awkward and impersonal. He found himself overthinking his answers, second-guessing his qualifications, and struggling to convey the enthusiasm he once felt for his career. The energy he'd once had seemed to have been replaced by a weary resignation. The process felt like a constant reminder of his current predicament, A cycle of hope followed by disappointment. Have you ever felt like you weren't presenting your best self during a job interview due to stress or lack of confidence? What strategies do you use to prepare mentally and emotionally for interviews? One particularly disheartening interview was for a role he felt perfectly qualified for. The hiring manager seemed impressed with his resume but spent most of the interview grilling him about why he'd left his previous company. Mark explained the restructuring, but he could see the skepticism in the interviewer's eyes. It was as if there was an unspoken assumption that anyone who'd been laid off must have been underperforming. He left that interview feeling deflated and angry. The unfairness of the situation felt palpable. Have you ever felt unfairly judged during a job interview? How did you handle that feeling? What are some of the most frustrating aspects of the modern job search process? How do you stay motivated and maintain a positive outlook when facing repeated rejections? What resources or strategies have you found most helpful in your job search journey? The weeks turned into months, and the initial adrenaline of the job search gave way to a gnawing sense of doubt. Mark found himself increasingly isolated, spending his days in his home office, the silence punctuated only by the click of his keyboard and the occasional sigh of frustration. His father's words continued to echo in his mind, fueling his insecurities. He started to believe that maybe his father was right. Maybe he had been too comfortable. Maybe he wasn't as valuable as he thought he was. It's a slippery slope when self-doubt starts to creep in, isn't it? How do you recognize when you're being overly critical of yourself, and what steps do you take to challenge those negative thoughts? Sarah remained his rock, constantly reminding him of his strengths and celebrating the small victories, like a promising phone screening or a positive email exchange. But even her unwavering support couldn't completely dispel the cloud of negativity that had settled over him. He felt like a failure, a disappointment to his family, especially to his father, whose expectations he'd always strived to meet. The weight of that perceived failure was heavy. Have you ever felt like you've let someone down, especially a parent or mentor whose approval you value? How did you navigate those feelings? One afternoon, feeling particularly low, Mark decided to call his younger sister, Emily. Emily had always been the more empathetic one in the family, the peacemaker. He hadn't told her much about his father's reaction, not wanting to cause any friction. But now, he needed someone to talk to, someone who might offer a different perspective. He recounted the conversation with his father, his voice tinged with hurt and frustration. Emily listened quietly, and when he was finished, she sighed. "Mark," she said gently, "you know how Dad is. He means well in his own way, but he doesn't always know how to express it. He comes from a different generation, a different mindset. It's often true that our parents' perspectives are shaped by their own upbringing and experiences, isn't it? How does understanding their background help you to interpret their words and actions?" Emily shared a story about a time when their father's business had faced a major setback. He'd been tough on himself, and on everyone around him, projecting his own anxieties and insecurities. "He's probably worried about you, Mark," Emily suggested. "He just doesn't know how to show it in a supportive way. For him, being tough is his way of preparing you for the worst, of pushing you to be resilient." This was a perspective Mark hadn't considered. Could it be that his father's harsh words weren't meant to be cruel, but rather a misguided attempt to motivate him? It's interesting how the same words can be interpreted so differently depending on the intention behind them, isn't it? Have you ever misinterpreted someone's words or actions, only to later realize their intentions were different? Emily's words offered a small glimmer of understanding, a crack in the wall of his resentment. It didn't excuse his father's harshness, but it provided a different lens through which to view it. Maybe his father's reaction wasn't about Mark's perceived failures, but about his own fears and anxieties projected onto his son. It was a thought that offered a sliver of comfort, a possibility that their relationship wasn't as fractured as Mark had initially felt. Sometimes, Understanding the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it, can make a big difference in how you process their words, right? How do you try to step into someone else's shoes and see things from their point of view? Have you ever considered that someone's seemingly harsh words might be coming from a place of concern or a different perspective rather than genuine criticism? How can shifting your perspective help you to process difficult interactions? Just when Mark felt like he was drowning in a sea of rejections and self-doubt, an unexpected email landed in his inbox. It was from a former colleague, David, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. David had moved on from Sterling Solutions a few years prior to start his own tech consulting firm. The email was brief but intriguing. David mentioned that his company was growing rapidly and he was looking to hire a project manager with Mark's experience. He'd heard about the layoffs at Sterling and wanted to reach out. A wave of hesitant hope washed over Mark. Could this be it? A genuine opportunity, from someone who knew his work and valued his skills? Have you ever been surprised by an unexpected opportunity that came along when you least expected it? How did it make you feel? He replied to David's email immediately, expressing his interest. Within an hour, David called him, his voice warm and enthusiastic. He explained the role in more detail, emphasizing the fast-paced and dynamic nature of his growing company. It sounded exciting, challenging, and exactly the kind of opportunity Mark had been hoping for, even if he'd started to believe it might never materialize. David invited him for an interview the following week. Mark hung up the phone, a genuine smile finally gracing his lips. This felt different. This felt real. When you're facing a tough situation, does a small glimmer of hope often feel like a significant turning point? How does it impact your motivation and outlook? The interview with David went well. They talked for over an hour, not just about Mark's experience and qualifications, but also about their shared history at Sterling Solutions and their mutual passion for technology. David seemed genuinely impressed and appreciative of Mark's background. He spoke candidly about the challenges and rewards of working for a startup, and Mark found himself feeling energized and engaged by the conversation. It was a refreshing change from the impersonal and often critical interviews he'd been having. What makes a job interview feel like a positive and engaging experience for you? What qualities do you look for in an interviewer and a potential employer? David told Mark he'd be in touch within a few days. The waiting was agonizing, but this time, Mark felt a sense of optimism he hadn't felt in weeks. He allowed himself to imagine a future where he was working again, contributing, feeling valued. He even started to think about how he might share this news with his father, hoping for a different reaction this time, a word of genuine encouragement. Have you ever found yourself cautiously optimistic after a promising job interview or opportunity? How do you manage your expectations during the waiting period? A few days later, David called again. Mark, he said, his voice upbeat, we'd love to offer you the position. Relief washed over Mark in a powerful wave, followed by a surge of excitement and gratitude. He'd done it. He'd landed a new job. And not just any job, but one that seemed like a great fit, a chance to learn and grow in a dynamic environment. He thanked David profusely, accepting the offer without hesitation. As he hung up the phone, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a sense of hope rekindled. This was a turning point. The storm had finally started to subside. What does success look and feel like to you, especially after overcoming a significant challenge? How do you celebrate those victories, big or small? Have you ever received an unexpected opportunity that felt like a lifeline during a difficult period? How did you react? And what did that experience teach you about resilience and the importance of staying open to new possibilities? With the good news of the job offer, Mark felt a renewed sense of confidence. He couldn't wait to tell Sarah and the kids. He imagined their excitement, their relief. But there was also another person he wanted to share this with, his father. This time, he hoped for a different reaction, a moment of genuine pride. He called his father that evening, his voice filled with a newfound optimism. "Dad," he began, "I have some good news. I got a job offer today." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then his father's voice, surprisingly subdued, said, "Oh. Well, that's good, Mark." The reaction wasn't quite the enthusiastic congratulations Mark had hoped for, but it was better than the harsh criticism he'd received before. Or so he thought. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's reaction to your good news wasn't quite what you expected? How did you interpret their response? "It's with a startup," Mark continued, trying to inject some enthusiasm into the conversation. "A consulting firm run by a former colleague. It sounds like a really exciting opportunity." There was another pause, longer this time. Then, his father's voice, heavy with something Mark couldn't quite place, said, "Mark, I need to tell you something." Mark's heart sank. What now? Had something happened? His father rarely sounded this way. "What is it, Dad?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "What are your immediate thoughts when someone close to you says, 'I need to tell you something,' in a serious tone?" His father took a deep breath. "Remember when I said you should have started your own business? That you were too comfortable?" Mark's stomach clenched. Here it comes, he thought. More criticism. But then, his father said something that completely surprised him. "Well, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "the reason I said that, it's because my company, it's not doing so well. We've been struggling for a while now. I've had to let go of a lot of good people. I was worried about you, Mark. I was worried about all of us." Mark was stunned. His father, the strong, self-reliant businessman, was struggling? He'd never shown any sign of it. He'd always projected an image of unwavering strength and success. This was a twist Mark hadn't seen coming. Have you ever been surprised by a vulnerability revealed by someone you always perceived as strong? How did it change your perception of them? His father continued, his voice cracking slightly. "I didn't mean to be so harsh. I was scared, and I didn't know how to express it. I took it out on you, and I'm sorry, Mark. I was wrong." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. Mark was speechless. He'd spent weeks feeling hurt and resentful of his father's criticism, never realizing the fear and vulnerability that lay beneath it. It was a profound shift in perspective. His father's harsh words weren't a judgment on Mark's choices, but a reflection of his own anxieties and struggles. It was a revelation that changed everything. Have you ever experienced a moment where understanding someone's hidden struggles completely reframed your perception of their behavior? Have you ever made assumptions about someone's motivations or circumstances, only to later discover a completely different reality? How can being open to unexpected truths change your relationships and understanding of others? The revelation of his father's struggles hung in the air, creating a new understanding between them. Mark's anger and resentment began to dissipate, replaced by a wave of empathy and concern. He realized that his father's harsh words hadn't come from a place of judgment, but from a place of fear and worry, masked by his usual gruff exterior. It was a reminder that everyone, even the strongest people, face their own battles and insecurities. This newfound understanding paved the way for a different kind of conversation, a conversation filled with honesty and vulnerability. Have you ever found that sharing vulnerabilities can lead to a deeper connection with someone? "Dad," Mark said softly, "I didn't know. I'm sorry you're going through this." There was a pause, and then his father's voice, thick with emotion, replied, "Thanks, son. It means a lot." They talked for a long time that evening, not just about Mark's new job, but about his father's business, the challenges he was facing, and the toll it was taking on him. For the first time, Mark felt like he was talking to his father not as a son seeking approval, but as one adult to another, sharing their struggles and offering support. It was a profound shift in their dynamic. What does it feel like to connect with a parent on a more adult, peer-to-peer level? How does it change your relationship? Mark shared the details of his new job, the excitement he felt about the opportunity, and the sense of relief that had washed over him. His father listened intently, and this time, his response was different. "That sounds like a good move, Mark," he said, his voice genuinely encouraging. "David's a smart kid. You'll do well there." It was the kind of validation Mark had longed for, and it meant even more now, knowing the context of his father's own struggles. The harshness was gone, replaced by a genuine warmth and pride. It's amazing how a shift in understanding can completely transform a relationship, isn't it? Have you ever experienced a moment of reconciliation that significantly improved a strained relationship? Over the next few weeks, Mark settled into his new role, enjoying the challenges and the fast-paced environment of the startup. He made a conscious effort to stay in touch with his father, checking in regularly, offering support in any way he could. Their conversations became more open, more honest, and more meaningful. The wall that had stood between them for so long began to crumble, replaced by a newfound sense of connection and understanding. Mark realized that sometimes, the harshest words can mask the deepest fears, and that true strength lies not in unwavering stoicism, but in the vulnerability to share those fears and seek connection. What have you learned about the different ways people express their emotions, especially during times of stress or vulnerability? Have you ever experienced a situation where a difficult relationship with a family member improved through open communication and a deeper understanding of each other's perspectives? What steps did you take to facilitate that change? Life after the job loss and the subsequent reconciliation with his father took on a new perspective for Mark. He approached his new job with a renewed sense of gratitude and enthusiasm, appreciating the opportunity and the fresh start it provided. He learned that career setbacks, while painful, can also be catalysts for growth and change, pushing you out of your comfort zone and leading you to unexpected opportunities. What are some of the unexpected positive outcomes you've experienced after facing a professional challenge? His relationship with his father deepened in ways he hadn't thought possible. The shared vulnerability of their recent experiences had created a stronger bond between them, built on honesty and empathy. Mark realized that his father's generation often struggled with expressing emotions openly, and that his harsh words were often a misguided attempt to prepare him for the realities of life. Understanding this didn't excuse the pain those words had caused, but it allowed Mark to forgive and move forward with a greater sense of compassion. How has your understanding of your parents' generation and their values influenced your relationship with them? He also learned the importance of self-compassion during times of adversity. The job search had been a grueling and often demoralizing experience, and he realized that he had been too hard on himself, internalizing the rejections and allowing his father's words to fuel his self-doubt. He began to practice more self-care, focusing on his well-being and reminding himself of his strengths and accomplishments. It's so important to be kind to ourselves, especially when we're facing challenges, isn't it? What are some of the ways you practice self-compassion? Looking back on the experience, Mark saw it as a turning point, a difficult chapter that ultimately led to growth and a deeper understanding of himself and his relationships. He realized that life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and that resilience isn't about avoiding setbacks, but about how you navigate them. It's about finding strength in unexpected places, learning from your experiences, and cherishing the support of loved ones. What is one of the most important lessons you've learned from navigating a challenging period in your life? Mark's story is a powerful reminder that even in the midst of heartbreak and disappointment, there is always the potential for growth, understanding, and new beginnings. It shows us that sometimes, the people who seem the harshest may be carrying their own burdens, and that open communication and empathy can bridge even the widest gaps. And it highlights the importance of self-compassion and resilience in the face of life's inevitable challenges. What is one takeaway from Mark's story that resonates with you the most? How can you apply this lesson to your own life, whether you're facing a career challenge, a difficult family dynamic, or any other kind of setback. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments below or join the conversation on our social media channels. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and share it with a friend who might need to hear it. We'll be back next week with another story that explores the complexities and beauty of the human experience. Until then, take care and remember, you've got this.